Hi, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast. Today, I have Allistair McCaw on the show with me. Allistair is recognized as one of the world's leading figures in human performance, team culture, and leadership. For over 25 years, Allistair's worked with numerous Fortune 500 companies, Olympians, Grand Slam champions, NCAA colleges, and professional sports teams. He's an author of 4 best-selling books and a much sought-after keynote speaker. Allistair consults and partners with sports teams and corporations around the globe, optimizing individual and group potential. His podcast, Champion Minded, is available on iTunes and YouTube. A former 5-time world championship competitor in the sport of duathlon, 2-time national fitness champion, and a veteran of 29 marathons, Allistair resides in Delray Beach, Florida. Allistair, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure. Good to be here, Kenneth.
So where I'd really like to start with you is just get into a little bit of the sporting background, because especially when people have built, such a career in coaching as you have, I'm always curious, how they got started into that. So could you talk a little bit about what the sports were that you played growing up and sort of what led you to coaching?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Northern Ireland, and at the age of 6, we moved to South Africa. I had 3 brothers. So, if anyone who knows South Africa or Australia or New Zealand, they're sports crazy, especially the sports like cricket, rugby, those Southern Hemisphere sports. So I was brought up in a very sporting family, 3 brothers. So there was a lot of competitiveness in the backyard. I was the youngest, so I'd get beat up. So I think it's something that toughened me up a little bit more. You'll usually find that in certain families where the youngest was actually the one that went on to be better in sports because they were competing against their older brothers and sisters. That's actually something that's true in a case study, is that a lot of the times the youngest is the one that does the best because they've learned from the mistakes of the brothers and sisters. And if the parents were coaching as well, then, the experiments would be the first 2 kids and then the next one would be the successful one.
I'm a younger sibling too, so I like that theory. I'm gonna stick with it.
yeah, but it's a proven study.
Yeah.
So in South Africa, obviously the weather's always good. So it's a sports crazy nation, and because I was brought up there during the apartheid years in the 80s and early 90s, and then Nelson Mandela got released, which was an amazing experience to be there and experience that in our history. Our focus, because there was a lot of sanctions on the country, our focus was very on sports. That was like our outlet, the whole country, for example. And I played 7 sports in school. I played rugby, cricket, soccer, track and field, cross country, tennis. I don't know how many is that, 6 or 7. But anyway, I played a lot of sports. So multi-sports was in you. It would be normal to play 4 or 5 hours of sports after school. We'd have school from 7:30 until 1:30, and then you'd be there until dark, until 6:37. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, you're just absorbed in sports all day long. So very fortunate to be brought up with that. Wanted to be a professional tennis player, got to a pretty good level by the age of 13, 14. I was just outside the top 10 in the country in my age group. However, we couldn't afford the coaching. And when you get to a certain level in sports, it requires better coaching, better facilities, travel, and we just couldn't afford that. So I quit tennis because, I'd end up with, rackets with no strings in them because we couldn't afford to put new strings in them, for example. Even a side story is, there's a will. How does it go? There's a will, there's a way. I would actually sit alongside tennis courts and listen to the coaches working with players, and I'd steal that information and go work on something that coach had just been telling that kid, for example. So if it was make a C shape on your forehand, I'd go, okay, C shape on your forehand. I'd go down to the wall at the bottom court and I'd hit forehands with a C shape. So I was stealing coaching information. So maybe that's where it all started. And that was when I was like 10, 11. Maybe I didn't even realize that's where my coaching career started, was stealing information. I think Picasso said that we're all thieves. We steal information all the time. So 14, I quit tennis and I took up a sport thinking, what's not going to cost me much money? Running. Okay, running's good. By the age of 16, I was the 5-kilometer national champion in under 16s. So I ran a time of 15:07 at the age of 16, which is when I think back about it now, I'm thinking, I can't even break a 20 right now. I got a little bit injured. I mean, I would train insane. I would train 4 or 5 hours a day. Nobody needed to ask me. I didn't have a coach. My parents were never pushy. They would just say, whatever makes you happy. So I was self-driven. And I got a little bit injured, and somebody said to me, why don't you just borrow my bike and just keep fit? And I said, okay, that's a good idea. Got hooked on that. That's where I got into triathlon. Did a few team triathlons. I thought, I like this. Wasn't a good swimmer. Took up duathlon. And I had a pretty good career, 5 world championships, for example. But getting back to my coaching career, I think it all started in the gyms. I had jobs from an early age, delivering newspapers, I flipped burgers, everything at 14, 15. There was a gym that was above the restaurant that I waited in. And I asked the owner, look, I can't pay for a membership, but I'll do jobs for you. And he said, sure, you can start by cleaning the locker rooms, the dressing rooms. I said, sure. No job was too small for me. And again, where there's a will, there's a way. If it's going to pay for my gym contract, great. Because that was a luxury back then. I mean, having a gym contract.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, is that gyms haven't changed in terms of pricing for many years. Do you know that? I mean, memberships are still pretty much the same. It was expensive back then. So now it's reasonable because it's so competitive. But that's how I started. I would work out before the gym would open, which was like 4 a.m. in the morning. And then I thought to myself, why don't I do a fitness trainer course? And I did. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was through. It was, this is 25, 30 years ago. And I thought, I like this. Started as a fitness trainer. By the age of 21, I was managing a gym that had 7,000 members. It was owned by Richard Branson of Virgin. So he opened up some gyms in South Africa. So I already had, I would say I was pretty mature by 21 to manage a gym of, I think we had 42 staff and, like I said, 7,000 members. Of course, I had a great assistant manager who I leaned on a lot. He was fantastic, so a lot of credit to him. So I had some good mentors without even realizing it. Got into personal training at around the age of 22, 23. I had the market of the sports celebrities in South Africa. I had the Miss Universe. I had Miss South Africa pageant competitors, beauty queens, CEOs. I mean, this is all before the age of 26, 27. And, I wasn't good in school. I never went to college. I just had an insane work ethic and an insane drive to be really, really good in something. So that's a little bit of my history of the sports and how I got into the gym industry.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the insane work ethic is evident just from, being 10, 11 years old, spending time by the tennis court, stealing info from, coaches and going and putting the time and the work into yourself. And then obviously in your career, like, it's developed quite a long ways since, that time 25 years ago. But what I notice when I follow you is you've got a very different mindset to a lot of strength and conditioning coaches out there, where it's about so much more than just the sets and the reps. You're not, just prescribing the quote unquote perfect program. When I look at what you do, it's so much more about relationships. It's so much more about, understanding the athlete on a deeper level. Can you talk a little bit about, how that mindset came to be with you within your coaching? What drew you away from simply the sets and the reps and more into that personal side of it?
I think that's a great question. I think, my first book, 7 Keys to Being a Great Coach. Now, if you were to say, what are the qualities of a great coach? You could think of 50 things, right? You'd think of, everything: time management, honesty, competence, all these things. But, the 7 keys, one of them was interpersonal skills. I think it's key number 5. I should know, I wrote the book. Interpersonal skills, the ability to get along with others, the ability to have chemistry in a team, the ability to, your best ability is your likability. And I find, in the gym world, it's very competitive, but there's almost sometimes a nastiness, a competitiveness of people under one roof, which is just wrong. That just creates a poor culture where, yes, you're competing against another trainer for a client, but, if you're just simply a nicer person, you'll probably get more clients. There's an observation I had when I lived in Tampa a few years ago, and I joined a gym, not to work, but to be anonymous and just be there to work out for myself. And I was almost like a fly on the wall. And I would always just watch trainers, and there was maybe 10 trainers there, and I had to look at their resumes on the wall. You know how it goes, their qualifications and a little bit about them. But there was always two that were always busy. They were extremely busy. And my observation of their exercises was they didn't have great stuff. Their technique wasn't that great. Sometimes you'd see someone doing a tricep extension and the elbows are out and the trainer wasn't correcting it, and little things that we see that we can be petty about, like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
We're all judgmental, and I find that just pettiness. But I was thinking these two are always incredibly busy, and they charge the most. This is very interesting. But here's the thing. They were the only two that consistently would say hello to everybody in the gym, including me. Not just their clients, but they would be smiling and they'd say hello, and they'd see someone was struggling putting a pin into the machine, and they'd go help them. And I observed this, and I was like, there it is. They're just likable people. They say hello to everybody, and they're the busiest people in the gym, and they earn the most money in the gym. Now you've got their Muscle Mike over there in his vest. You've got all these great looking trainers, but they're not as busy. And it came down to that they weren't just as friendly as these other two. And it was a very simple observation. Now, I have a massive amount of gratitude for certain mentors in my life, some who I've not even met, because now we have mentors on social media. I have mentors on social media that I follow, like you probably on Twitter, and that we don't know them personally, but we love their ideas, their philosophies, and we go, that's mentorship.
Of course.
Well, you don't have to have a guru sitting next to you to have a mentor. Mentorship is information and following somebody where you go, I like that. Maybe you can't have dialogue with them, but when it comes to the S&C industry, the sports performance industry, for me, Mark Verstegen, Michael Boyle, Anthony Rena, of course, of Strength Podcast as well. Those have been massive influences for me. The information they've given. I love Michael's mindset. Also, I just love that he says, just don't take yourself so seriously. When you're younger, you're trying to be the guy or the girl. And then, of course, Mark Verstegen was a pioneer. I mean, started with Athletes Performance. Actually, he was down here in IMG back in the 90s. Worked with a few players, professional athletes that I eventually worked with. So I got to learn, about Mark as well. And I always had massive respect. Mary Pierce, who was a Grand Slam tennis champion. She was actually born in Canada, but she played for France. She worked with Mark, and then she worked with me. So, just great influences. It's so important to have good mentors. And like I said, you don't have to know them personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of that, like, you're someone that I've been following for a number of years since reading your book, 7 Keys to Being a Great Coach. It was my old roommate that had your book, and I ended up, grabbing it from him and reading through that. And it really did help shift my perspective on how to approach coaching as well, because there's, like I said, there's so much in that book just about, the things beyond the programming, because I think so many coaches in our industry think that, hey, if I have the best program, if I know the most information, then clients are just going to flock to me. But as you said, clients are likely going to be more likely to flock to somebody who they feel good around, they feel comfortable with, they want to, talk more with, and just developing the relationship side of it more so than simply perfect programming and always being the guy who knows everything. Because if you know anything from being in this industry, it's that we never know everything.
No, and with age, that's what you discover, is the more you think you know, the more you don't know. But one of the key things is make every person that comes in front of you feel like the most special person in the world. And it's very, very easy. You don't have to be false about it, but just find things you can compliment on. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to be cheesy and overdoing it, but just everybody loves a good compliment. It could be something about your clothes or your hair or just your energy, your radiation. You tell them that makes a person feel incredible, and they want to be around you. But getting back to one thing I love from Michael Boyle, I actually attended one of his courses in Dublin, Ireland. Out of all places, it's easier to probably go to Boston or Orlando or somewhere to see him. But I thought, let me go across to Ireland. I'll go visit my gran, who just turned 93 yesterday. Oh, wow. And while I'm there, Michael Boyle's got a seminar down in Dublin. And there was one particular slide. Now, he spoke for 8 hours straight. I mean, there was a short break in between, but 8 hours straight. I know what that's like. Believe me, you lose your voice. And he just had so much information. And he said, do you want to know what the most important certification in S&C is? And I was like, most important certification. I'm thinking all these fancy. He says, it's a CNP. I'm like, a CNP? He said, yeah, a certified nice person.
I love that because I could just see it too, sitting in the crowd thinking, okay, like, is it the CSCS? Is it this? Is it that? Nope, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And now can you talk a little bit about, now we've talked a little bit about the evolution, but what's sort of the balance in your career right now? How do you sort of spend your days? Obviously, COVID time is a little bit different than most times through the year, but could you talk a little of the balance between how much coaching do you do, how much speaking, things like that?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not so much hands-on anymore, not just this year, but years before. You might have seen, if you followed me, my career has evolved with regards to S&C, coaching, into team culture, into leadership. Obviously, my last book was about winning attitude and mindset, which can be used in any spectrum in life or sports, but I've evolved a little bit that way. I still work with a few athletes on a consultancy basis. I'm not actually in the gym so much as more. Now and then, like for example, December, I'd go to Bangkok, Thailand to work with a professional tennis player from Korea who's one of the top in the world. I would still do those because I obviously still love it. Excuse me. But I would say 80% of my time is really not this year, but was spent on the road, visiting colleges, working with athletic teams, working with the S&C, or going to professional sports teams in Europe, for example. And then I work with some corporates as well. So right now my focus is a lot on high performance, leadership, team culture, which is truly my passion. I just absolutely love it. It's no problem for me just to sit half a day on the computer researching teams and researching leadership and so on and so forth. But definitely, I haven't walked away from S&C or sports performance. It's still a massive thing. But one thing I'm really not as in tune with or focused on is, let's just say, drills and skills and exercises and so on and so forth. So that's definitely one area I'm not as caught up in as at the moment. I was still very big into the fundamentals. If you were to watch a training session of mine, it's still very much fundamentals training. There's nothing fancy.
Yeah.
Fancy usually ends up injured. Getting back to one thing you said there, people don't come to you for your exercises. They come to you for your energy.
Yeah.
They've got a choice that they know that, let's just say there's 10 trainers there. They all know their stuff, or should know their stuff.
Hopefully.
Of how to train somebody. And they all have different styles, but people will come to you for your energy. Do you make them feel special? Are you, in a way, a mentor in a way, and a listening piece as well? Being a great listener is a massive quality of a trainer. They want to come and they just want to talk and get their stuff out and get your opinion, or maybe not get your opinion, just talk, for example. So I think as trainers, it's very important to remember that session is for them to, if they want to vent, let them vent. If they want to be quiet, they be quiet. You've got to be like a thermometer and feel them, what they want from that session. Maybe they need a pickup. So that's why they'll come back to you.
Yeah.
They're not really interested in this exercise where you're standing on a Bosu balancing with a teaspoon and with a bungee cord. They're not interested in that stuff. Those are just being a bored trainer trying to find something that's going to, look fancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so getting back to, that team culture side, the thing that you're much more focused on now, I've always found that a really interesting aspect of, coaching, whether in my case, coaching individuals in small groups, or whether you are in a position where you're coaching teams. So beyond those sets and reps and, the exercises and things like that for coaches, what would you say are the most important things for us as coaches to be focused on with any group of athletes, whether it be a team or whether it be, a small group of 2 or 3?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's important. We get back to interpersonal skills and relationships, is knowing each athlete as a person first. We talk about winning moments. What are winning moments? It's that time where you're walking in the parking lot, or you're having a meal, or you're driving with an athlete to a competition or a gym, whatever, and you're having a one-on-one conversation with them, and you're talking about their family and their whatever they want to talk about, but nothing about sports, for example, or about their training. That's where you build those connections where, they say they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So definitely the building of relationships, of getting to know the person in front of you better. You don't even know, let's say you work with a group of kids, what kids are struggling, what kids are going through a very traumatic time. There could be violence at home. There could be all these things, and you are their refuge. They're coming to get out of that. And now if you're tough on them, now they're getting it from both sides, for example. So we've got to be sympathetic, empathetic to that, and really understand that other person of what they need. And I think that's a key area. We call it, empathy, if you like, or good emotional intelligence. If someone always asks me, what book do you recommend? And there's hundreds of books that are great. One of them would definitely be on emotional intelligence, the ability to understand yourself, your personal competence, and the ability to understand others, your social competence. That will get you much further than the certificates on your wall.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I really wanted to get into with you was one of your other books. Now, of course, the title's slipping my mind, but Building the Championship Mindset. Champion-minded, that's the one. I knew it was something like that, but from my own perspective as a coach, there's a lot about what you do that I try to implement into my own day-to-day, but from the perspective of an athlete, like I mentioned before we turned on the recording, one of the real goals of this show that I'm trying to get into is what it takes beyond simply the skill of the game to develop these top level athletes. Because what I know I've run into, and I'm sure so many other coaches out there do as well, is kids that come in and they want to be at the top. They want to be, the best in the world at their sport, but then they have no concept beyond just playing their sport a lot, what it takes to actually get there. And so when it comes to the mindset side, the mental side, I think this is something that gets so easily overlooked among coaches and athletes alike. Can you talk a little bit about, champion-minded, what sort of went into that book, and then what people can do to implement some of those strategies into their lives as well?
Yeah, sure. Champion-minded, which is creating excellence in sports and in life. So a lot of the book is around about what sports can teach us and the benefits of that. It was written in a format that's very easy to read, especially for today's generation. Each chapter is, no more than a 3-minute read. So that's why it's been, I think, very, very successful, is because coaches or parents can get their kid this book and say, just read a chapter a day. And look at 2 pages. Okay, that's doable. 3 pages, that's doable. I don't have to read a whole book.
Yeah.
And bite-sized information. So the structure has been has been designed with keeping in mind how today's generation are learning. Very quick information. Don't go on and on and on. When I was a kid, I was very interested in improvement and the mindset and so on in my sports, because I was trying to find every edge. But I could never find books that were easy to read. Maybe that's something about my academic side, but it was always, I'm not really interested in the left side of the brain. I want to know what I do when I feel pressure, what I do when I have nerves, what I do when my opponent cheats, what should I eat, what is a champion lifestyle. I wanted to know that stuff. I wasn't interested in like I said, like science as such, even though it's important. I just wanted like practical things to do when I'm in competition. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Another reason was getting through that it's not all talent and, how good you are. It's the work that you put in. It's those lessons that you take in life with regards to work ethic, time management, controlling the controllables, your attitude, your energy is controlled by your attitude, for example. Your body language is controlled by your attitude, for example. All these small little things that are controllables, achievable, you don't have to be talented. You maximize those, become the best in the things that require no talent, so to say. We see the brilliance of a Tom Brady or a Ronaldo or a Roger Federer or Serena, and we think, wow, they're just talented, they're just brilliant. Yeah, of course, you've got to have some genetics. Let's not kid each other, but they're simply people that have spent more time developing their craft. Serena lives 20 minutes from me. I know her coach very well as well, and she's still putting in 3-4 hour days on the tennis court, even with having a family now and stuff. So don't think they just wake up and they're just good. You know what I mean? Tom Brady is still working as hard as he did. It's these elite athletes that you see how they live like champions. That's really what Champion Minded is about. It's a lifestyle, the way you act, the way you think, the way you look, the way you practice, the way you compete. And the biggest word of all, which is the eighth component of being champion minded, is commitment. What is commitment? It's doing what you said you would after the mood has left you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an extremely important element of it. And so for those kids that maybe are, a little bit younger right now and have the goals of, being the next Tom Brady, being the next Serena Williams, or whatever athlete that is that they're sitting there idolizing. One thing that I know I've had discussions with athletes and with parents alike about is kids having the time to just be a kid. And, I understand that on the surface, that feeling, but at the same time, the way I look at it is if you want to live that lifestyle of, that Tom Brady, that Serena Williams, there's no better time to start that commitment than right now. Can you talk a little bit about, what are your thoughts with like how early should kids be trying to develop some of these traits, and what are some good places for kids to start when they're at a younger age? What's a good place to start with those commitments and with that, developing that championship mindset?
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the triangle, the coach, parent, athlete. And I always say it's coach driven. I don't believe that. I believe it's athlete driven, coach led, and the parent supports, of course, which is important. Of course, it means transportation, financial, emotional support, etc. So, it's important that each one has a defined role, but, to be successful, I believe it should be athlete driven. Like no one had to push me. No one had to ask me to do the extra work. No one had to ask me like I said, to put in extra time. I chose that myself. So, three things which I find are critical to a kid being successful is that it's a passion. It's their choice. They love the sport. They're a scholar of it. They love watching it on TV. They love reading about it. They're just consumed with it the whole time. The second one is hunger to succeed. How hungry are you to succeed? Because that will determine if you get up at 5 o'clock or not, or you sleep in, or you're willing to stay in the rain afterwards and practice your free kicks or your throws or whatever it may be. Are you willing to do that without someone asking you to do it? And the third one is of course, self-discipline. The self-discipline to do those things as well. So passion, you must love it. Hunger, your desire to succeed, and self-discipline of doing the things that others don't feel like doing or want to do. That is what success comes down to, is doing the things that you don't really feel like doing, but you do them and you do them well. And that's what determines the good from the great. Another thing as well is consistency. Is, the average do it sometimes, the good do it most of the time, the great do it all of the time. They're consistent on a daily basis. So, but definitely the bottom line is love for what you do, because you're not going to get better at something you don't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
We see so many kids, especially here in Florida, where there's a lot of academies and there's a lot of, sports places like golf and tennis and so on. And, they're good. They're 12, 13, 14, they're national level, but you can see some of them they absolutely hate it because they maybe get a lot of pressure at home and the parents never stop talking about it. And the kid is just all about results. And then they quit at 15, 16, and they go do something else. And it's just, it's a pity because they've been pushed too far,
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I think the athlete-driven aspect of it is extremely important. Like if the athlete's not into it, then the parents are only going to be able to push them so far, or a coach is only going to be able to push them so far. But with that self-discipline, the hunger, all of those elements you were just talking about, do you find that these are something that kids just have, or do you find these are things that at a younger age you can start to develop in yourself if maybe you want that end goal, but that self-discipline doesn't come super naturally? Is there things that kids can be working on to develop that within themselves as well?
talking about like more like the passion that they grow to love it more? Is that what you're asking?
The passion, but also the discipline. So if they love the sport, but maybe the discipline to, be at training more, do the extra practice and things like that doesn't come as naturally, is that a habit you find can be developed?
Absolutely. And that all starts in the home. Behavior starts in the home. Self-discipline starts in the home. You can't expect as a coach not to change a kid because, what goes on in the home, for example, that's their foundation. Those are their beliefs as well, or their values, so to say, even if they don't align with yours. So, it really starts with the parents and the rules or standards that are within the household. Parents can create the right environment for their child to be. Obviously, the goal of every parent is to have a child that should be a good adult, a good human being when they're an adult. I think that should be the goal. Sport and career comes after that, I believe. So, it all starts there. It's what goes on at home and how they're brought up. On my podcast a few weeks ago with Mike Boyle, actually, I had a question for him with regards, a parent comes to you and say, how do I get my kid more tougher? Or how do I develop more grit and resilience with my kid? And Michael just said, well, there probably needs to be more discipline at home, so I buy into that 100%.
Yeah, and for parents as well, because as much as with this show, I am trying to talk to athletes, I think, like you said, there's a lot of people involved in developing that athlete, and parents are clearly a huge element of that, especially early on. What kind of things would you recommend for parents if they're trying to support their kid, but, they want to be hands-on and they want to develop them this way or that way? What would be your best advice for parents as far as, developing that good adult or developing, in the end, potentially that good athlete or whatever that kid ends up doing?
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Parenting is leadership. So, your example is the most powerful form of leadership. So, it's what you're doing as a parent and how you're acting with or reacting to situations, for example. The way you communicate, all these things being brought up in the house. Do you scream at each other? Is that acceptable? So really it starts with the values and the principles of the parents themselves, because like I said, parenting is leadership. So, and they're leading those kids. I mean, those kids, all they really want to do is just please their parents. A 10-year-old, 11-year-old, the parents saying, yeah, he or she wants to be a professional athlete. Well, really, does the kid really want to be? Or is that just something the parents just, put in their mind, and that's what they want their kid to be, for example? Like they said, like a quote I put out the other day, if I can remember it, there's a difference between wanting your kid to be the best and wanting the best for your kid. And yes, it's great if your kid goes on to be a professional or whatever, fantastic. But at what cost? So it's very difficult to have those conversations with a parent as a coach. You can't tell them how they're going to run their household or what their standards and things should be. So what you get arriving at your practice is a product of what goes on at home.
Yeah. And then, so, as you said, we can't sit there and tell anybody how to run their household, because clearly that's far out of our place. But if we do have an athlete that, you're working with that maybe doesn't have that great example at home or that great support system at home, but does have the drive, what do you think are the most important things now for coaches to be doing to, help pull this athlete in the right direction, despite what might be going on in the rest of their lives?
Well, it's very important to make it clear from the beginning, from session one, is that, you might have your rules and standards at home, but these are the rules and standards of our academy or my training session, for example. And that is, it could be anything. It could be the standards you have is being on time, the way we talk to each other, we don't interrupt, dress code, helping pick up equipment without having to be asked. You can have, all these standards, for example, but those are the standards in your gym or your facility or whatever it may be. Okay. That's how it works here. It might work like that at home where you don't have to wash the dishes or do anything, but here we all help each other. That's our standards here. These are our standards of excellence, so to say. So, and then of course, the human connection, being the example. So maybe let's just say their parents aren't a great example, or they come from a broken home, or they come from, trauma, for example, and like I said, they're coming to you as refuge, is that they're maybe learning a lot of things from you, or they see you as a father figure or a mother figure, for example. I know a lot of coaches in college that have become a father figure or a mother figure to an athlete who maybe hasn't come from such a good background. And, for me, that's what coaching is all about, is how will you be remembered? What person were you? What legacy will you leave as a person? Again, people don't care how much you know until how much you care. So as coaches, we're given a very privileged platform that we shouldn't waste, is that we can change lives. Be a good person. Think about the other person. Have empathy, because we don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Even just when you say, that privileged platform as coaches, like it gives me goosebumps. It's just such a nice feeling to know that, yeah, you are in a position where you can change the course of an athlete's life. And one thing
somebody is taking time out of their day to come and see you and paying you for it.
Yeah.
So it's a privilege. They want to spend an hour with you 3 times a week or whatever it may be. That's a privilege. Someone's paying to come and see you. Like I said, you might think it's all about your exercises and all your things. It's not. They're coming to see you. They feed off your energy. They want to feel good when they leave that building.
Yeah, of course. And so that leads me to another thing that I know you talk a lot about is finding your purpose. And I know I've seen speeches of yours that you talk about, when you wake up, maybe not feeling it that day or whatever it might be, it's your purpose that gets you up and keeps you going. And can you talk a little, whether it's on the coach side or whether it's on the athlete side, because I know that's something that a lot of athletes struggle with, is they know they want to play at the top level, but then they have that day where they wake up feeling beat up, feeling sore, and they just don't want to do anything that day. But I love the way you put it of when you have those days, you think about your purpose, and that's what gets you up and keeps you going. What went into finding that purpose for you or creating that purpose for you, and how can other people replicate the success that's brought you?
Yeah, sure. And I'm like anyone else, there'll be mornings I wake up and I don't feel like doing what I need to do or have to do, but there's a way you build grit and resilience, is doing the things you don't really feel like doing. My first act of discipline in the day is making my bed. In fact, let me put it this way. The first thing I think of when I wake up is 2 things I'm grateful for. And that's every single morning. And that's become a habit. So I wake up and the first 2 things I think about is, what I'm grateful for. That's a great way to wake up. Then wake up and go, oh, it's raining, or looking out the window or whatever. So start the day with gratitude. I make my bed, which is the first act of discipline, is the general, I can't remember his name. He has a great YouTube thing on that, General McCracken, is it, or something. And he's got a book called Make Your Bed. So I believe in that, is that I'm doing something that I don't really feel like doing, is making my bed. It's easy just to leave it, but I make my bed. Okay, good. Gratitude, discipline. We've started our day and we're not even 2 minutes into it yet. That's the way I want to start. Maybe I'm feeling tired. Maybe I'm not up to it. But then I think to myself, you know what? Today I get another opportunity to add value to the world. And that's a massive part of my purpose and my vision, is to inspire as many people as possible, to help others realize their purpose in life as well. And, it really comes down to the concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese concept. I think you spell it IKIGYU, I think it is, ikigai. I'm probably way off there.
Well, it's about it up after.
Yeah, it's about your passion. It's about your purpose. It's about something you do that if you didn't get paid for it, that you'd still do it with pleasure, for example. It's something that adds value to the world. And when you find that, there's a great diagram. If you just Google ikigai, you'll see the diagram there. When I look at that diagram, I know I'm on the right track of what I should be doing and what I am doing. And that's very much aligned to my purpose, is add value to the lives of others, inspire others to their own greatness, to their own excellence. And, that doesn't have to be massive. It can be achieve these 3 things each day. Repeat, repeat, repeat. That's where excellence comes along, is consistency of just doing the small little things very well every single day. That's what it comes down to. It's not these massive things that you think like, well, excellence is winning the Super Bowl and excellence is this massive thing over here. It's not. Excellence is achieving small little goals daily.
And so for anybody that's listening to that now, for, those younger athletes, again, that are maybe thinking about these things for the first time, what would you say is a good way for them to, develop those daily habits, or to start, figure out what those habits can be for them that can help them achieve the things they want to over time?
Well, that's where I think a coach or a parent comes in, is where they help them structure their day more. They need to achieve certain goals. For example, their homework needs to be complete. Their a training session, for example, maybe a nap before training. Those are small little things they need to achieve each day. And obviously, time management. If your gym is 10 minutes away from you, don't leave 10 minutes before. Leave 25 minutes before. Get there with 10, 15 minutes in hand. Or there could have been an accident on the way there, which makes you late, for example. So these are little things. What high performance is planning ahead. Time management is a massive one. Rather be well before time than be on time. So these are habits of excellence that people just think, that's that's not really that important. Really being coachable. Ask questions. Ask your coaches questions. Don't just wait for feedback. Be curious, be skeptical about things, and ask, why do we do it this way, and so on and so forth. So those are little ways you can improve yourself and improve high performance.
I love that you said that, because honestly, that's one of my absolute favorite things, is when I have an athlete come to me and say, well, why do we do this exercise like this? Or, what's the purpose of this exercise? And I find so often it almost catches me by surprise, because it doesn't happen nearly as often as I would hope. But, obviously it keeps me on my toes, because I know that everything that I have my athletes doing, they needs to have a purpose behind it. But it's so great when I hear them also questioning, what is this going to do for me? How is this going to help me when I'm back in sport? And I love that attitude, because it is showing a little bit more of accountability as well, right? You're not just doing what you're told. You want to understand why you're doing what you're told. And then once it's that much easier to really give it 100%.
Exactly. No, you're spot on there. And we as coaches, that's our role as well, is to provide that information and those things, those tools for them, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Allistair, I appreciate all the time so far so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on here. Like I've mentioned a couple times, the goal of this show is to really dig into the behind the scenes of what creates great athletes and also great people, because I think that it is something that, as much as I have my niche that I'm sort of focused on, these are traits that, translate so well across the rest of life as well. And things that, if you are developing these traits for sport, you can carry into whatever it is you choose to do once sports wrap up for you. But I wanted to ask you, before we wrap up, is there anything that you felt we missed? Anything you felt that, you can add on to what we've talked about already in this regard?
I think obviously, we're doing this interview during the COVID period in 2020. And who knows, it most likely will continue in 2021. But, the ability to adapt, the most successful people right now, be it in sports, their careers, whatever, are adapting, they're hustling. Just don't sit back and play the victim of things. It's easy for all of us to play the victim right now. Like I said, 80% of my work has been taken away from me this year, but I'm not sitting back and crying over it. I'm hustling. Like, what can I do next? I'm adapting to the situation. So if I can just encourage you out there to stay positive, sow seeds. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work that I'm maybe not getting paid for, but I know in the future will pay off. So, don't be discouraged if things aren't happening for you. You're not as busy as you should be right now. Keep planting seeds, build relationships, stay adaptable. Don't play the victim, play the victor. And I can promise you, if you keep sowing these seeds and putting in the work daily, it will pay off. It will pay off.
I love that, because, whether it is from a business standpoint, like yourself, or whether it is from an athlete standpoint, because the amount of conversations I had when the original lockdown happened for us back in March, where people were saying, well, I don't have access to a gym, so I can't do anything. And then, we would sort of figure out that, hey, even if you've just got a few things around your house, you can do something. It might not be ideal. It might not be the training program you thought you were going to be on this off season, but there's always something to be done if, as you said, and as you said before, where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen. I believe that. So
I love it, man. So again, thank you so much for all the time today. I really appreciate it. If there's someone that's looking to get in touch with you, whether it's about something they heard in this interview or just general questions for you about, what it is that you do, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Well, as you know, I'm pretty active on Twitter, at Allistair McCaw. That's my favorite social media platform. Instagram, Be Champion Minded. I have a Facebook page, Allistair McCaw page. Or you can also go to my website, allistairmccaw.com. On there, you'll find information, you'll find resources, and my podcast. So those are probably the best mediums.
And I can absolutely vouch for your Instagram, Twitter, and the podcast. So, if you are out there and you aren't following Allistair already, please do yourself a favor. If you're trying to move forward, whether it's in a coaching career, whether it's in a sport career, whatever else, this guy's putting out so much great stuff all the time. So Allistair, I really appreciate you. You've helped me more than you could possibly know within my own career. And for anyone else out there, please go give this guy a follow. You will absolutely benefit from it. So for anybody else out there listening, this has been the Elite Development Podcast with Kenny Dussault and Allistair McCaw.